everyone, so I will be doing my March wrap-up. For the month of March, I read 5 books, so let's get started. The first book I read was The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanders. This is a young adult fantasy novel about a world similar to ours, but there are some of those who are chosen by the master to become arithmetists. The arithmetists have power to infuse life into two-dimensional figures known as chalklings. The arithmetists are the only defense against these creatures known as the wild chalklings. The arithmetists are trained at this academy which the book is taking place at, and there is this student named Joel. He is sadly just a regular kid. He was never chosen as a arithmetist, but he also goes to the academy because it's mixed, but the arithmetists and the regular kids never really interact with each other. But Joel is so fascinated with arithmetists, he sneaks into lectures for arithmetists whenever he has the chance. During summer break, Joel works with this arithmetist professor named Professor Finch on a project because arithmetists are going missing, and Joel and Finch are trying to figure out who did it, what the arithmetists' drawings are all about because they've never seen them before. I gave this a 4-star rating. It did take me a while to get into it. It took me a while to really understand and picture what arithmetists do. Each chapter starts with knowledge about arithmetists and some of their drawings that they do. And at first I thought it was like silly thinking about arithmetists just drawing with chalk as their form of fighting. But the more I read and the more I understood arithmetists, the more I began liking it because I understood that it was their form of magical powers. That's how they are casting their spell. So while they might be just drawing with chalk, like the line of forbidden, it's more powerful than that. Like the line of forbidden, it is an impenetrable force. Not even the arithmetists who drew it can pass it. It even can stop bullets. This is a young adult book, so it is not very complex. The world is not as detailed and there are things that are missing. I would like to know more about Nebraska, where the wild chalklings are, and more about wild chalklings and all that, but it doesn't really go into details, so it doesn't go into this complex world building like adult fantasy books do. Other than it not having a very complex world building, I really liked it. I liked all the characters, especially Professor Finch. He was just a lovable scatterbrain. The problem is that this book was written in 2014, and I looked on Goodreads. There was supposed to be a sequel, and it said that it was coming out in 2017. Since that is long gone, I have no idea if there will be a sequel to this book, which is very disappointing. So keep that in mind if you do want to read this book, that you might be left with some questions that might not be answered. The second book I read is A Serial Killer's Daughter by Carrie Ross. This is a story about Carrie Rawson, who in 2005 got a knock on the door, and when she answered it, it was the FBI. The FBI informed her that her father had been arrested for murdering 10 people. Her father is the serial killer known as the BTK killer. Throughout this book, she shares memories of her life before she knew who her father really was, and then after he was arrested, and her just trying to cope with everything. I gave this a 3-star rating. I can't even imagine what she has gone through. She thought of her father as her hero, and her world was turned upside down when she found out. I would recommend reading up on the BTK killer before reading this book because she doesn't go into detail about what he did. You're just getting her perspective and her coping with after the fact. And so I kind of had to do some research of myself to be like, okay, well, what did he do? Like, who was this person as the serial killer and not who she thought he was as a father? Throughout this book, a recurring theme of hers is to show people that she is also a victim of his, which I totally agree. Her whole life was a lie. Her father was killing way before her and her brother were born. So she kept trying to piece things together and try to figure out his lies. She found out that he hid evidence in her closet and throughout the house. And so that kind of really messed with her mind. A way that she coped with this was religion. And throughout the book there are a lot of religious passages, and so I just kind of like skipped over those because I'm not religious myself. But if you are, those passages might help. But for me, I really didn't care for that. The major problem I had with this book is that it had a lot of details, but it also didn't. There was a lot of things I was curious about and I thought was important for her to discuss, but she never did. And then a lot of details she went through, like her trip to the Grand Canyon with her father. There was like 3 chapters on that. Like, it didn't need all that details talking about it. I think a lot of things could have been shortened and a lot of things could have been expanded on. I think she focused on the wrong things at times. I also wish she talked more about her father's victim. She talked a lot about how she is a victim herself, which I agree. I am not denying that. But I just kind of wish that she talked more about them and who they were, and kind of like a big memory towards them as well. She kind of touches on who they were, but it was kind of more in a relationship to herself. So she mentioned it was a mother, it was a child, because she still couldn't wrap her head around the fact that her father was killing a wife and kids because he had a wife and kids. So she couldn't even imagine how he could do that. And so that's how she talked about the victims. I wish she talked about them more. The next 3 books are the books that my mom picked out for me to read. And the first one is Along Came a Spider by James Patterson. This is a mystery crime novel about Detective Alex Cross, who is on a case for missing children. I gave this a 4-star rating. I really enjoyed it. However, I think it is just a basic crime mystery novel, but there's nothing wrong with that because I enjoyed it. The problem I had with this book, and it's not the book's fault, is that I seen the movie years ago, but I still remember everything that happens, so it kind of spoiled it for me. So it wasn't very suspenseful or shocking that things happen. But I still enjoyed it, and it was definitely different from the movie in a lot of things. And I think Alex Cross is a very good character. I can see why Alex Cross is her favorite character series from the James Patterson books. The second book I read was Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk. This is about a reporter who gets an assignment to write about infant deaths. And while doing so, he notices that each person has a book opened up to the same page, and he soon realizes that this lullaby is a calling song and it kills people. So he inadvertently becomes like a serial killer because if he gets angry and he thinks the song, the person who he's thinking about who angered him, they just die. And so he's trying so hard not to kill people because he doesn't really want to do it. It's controlling him. And he meets somebody else that knows about this calling song, and so he has this plan about them going to the libraries across the country to rip out this page for the calling song so this doesn't happen to other people. I gave this a 3-star rating. I really enjoyed it at times. I couldn't put it down. But if you have read other Chuck Palahniuk stories, you know that he kind of goes off in some tangents sometimes and like things that aren't really necessary to the plot, and that I didn't really like, so I'm just okay, get back to the story because I really liked that. And I will say trigger warning for infant deaths. There is a really gruesome scene at the end that I'm not going to spoil. I'm just warning you because I'm sure other people know about Chuck Palahniuk. He goes for shock value and gore and stuff like that. But I will have my mom read this book. She said she wanted to, and because I have no idea if she'll like this book, because it is a hard book to gauge of who will like it and who wouldn't, because I think Chuck Palahniuk is not for everyone because he does have a unique way of telling stories. The last book I read was A Girl Without a Name by Sandra Block. This is a mystery thriller novel about Dr. Zoe Gold, who is working at a hospital, and one night Jane Doe is brought in who is catatonic, and she kind of becomes obsessed with trying to track down who she is and basically trying to help her out. I gave this a 2.5 3-star rating. I did enjoy this book. However, I think the description for this book is very misleading. There is a missing girl named Jane Doe that they don't know who she is. And the more she discovers it, the more she realizes that there are people who are trying to make sure she is not discovered. But I think it makes it seem more suspenseful than it actually is. A lot of it is dealing with Zoe, her personal life, and then her talking to Jane Doe and becoming obsessed with it, but not in the way that they're trying to portray it, if that makes sense. So I was entertained. I just thought it was going to be different than it actually was. And this is apparently the second book in the series, but it's not really like a series that you have to read in order, just like, James Patterson's book with Alex Cross books, because it goes case by case. So I wasn't confused at all. You just got to know Zoe more in the first book. And there is one issue that I had in this book, but I don't know if I should have an issue because it is not my place to say it. In this book, Jane Doe is African American. And during one part, she says the N-word when she's just talking to somebody, but not calling someone that. It was just, just using that word to address somebody. And then I looked it up, and it is written by a white author. It threw me for a loop. I was just kind of uncomfortable, but it is not my place to say if that is right or wrong. So let me know what your opinion on that is. So those are all the books I read in the month of March. Like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!